So, hi guys. I'm going to go through passage planning today, how we do it. Paper charts, all the instruments, yeah, we've got all that. To be honest, I don't use these now. Paper charts are now being phased out, and what we do is we use electronic charts. Now, there will be shock horror from many sailors, I'm sure, about that. We carry lots of redundancy. We have tablet, we have phone, we have an old MFD, and we have a newer MFD. So bags of redundancy, and we make sure everything is coordinated. So what we'll do is we'll tidy the chart away. I've just moved all the instruments out of the way. We do keep them, and we do use them as a reference every now and again. Something that is important though is reads. Make sure you've got a reasonably up-to-date copy of reads. This is for 2025. Up-to-date because tide tables. That's probably one of the most important things, but also when you're doing your passage planning, at the front of each section, you've got the areas that are being covered, the tidal streams, and then lights and buoys, and then passage information. And I use the passage information that's in here and other pilot books when they're available. And these give a good reference for things like watching out for any critical tidal streams. So what do we use mostly for? At first, creating the route. Well, that's Navionics. I have an up-to-date and a subscription, and it is critical to have a subscription for Navionics for my tablet. That also gives me the same subscription on my phone as well. So these two, the phone and the tablet, are the starting point. And the way I go about it is, first of all, so if we assume we're going to do a route from where we are now in Hartlepool up to Blythe, what I'll do is start, and I do an automatic route to start with. So from where we're at, and I know it's, people don't advise not to do automatic routing. I do it just to give a rough guide to start with. So we've got the route in, it's 29 miles, 29.8 miles, and that's what Navionics would recommend. Now, this takes me far too close to the headland and other things. So what we would do to start with then is to modify this route. So we'll put a different waypoint in out and away from the headland. A couple of waypoints in there. That takes us out into a clearer zone. And as we're passing places, I will zoom in and say yes or no. So we can adjust. Navionics does some queer things occasionally. Again, bringing us far too close inshore here. To bring that more onto the leading line. So that's how we would go, and I would refine that by zooming in and checking and looking at the overall route. So what that also gives me then are waypoints and the distances between the waypoints or from the start. And that, for the next part of what I do, is fairly critical. The other thing we look at, obviously, are the tidal streams and the tide heights, looking at what restrictions we've got. Now, there is a restriction, obviously, for Hartlepool, and that is approximately plus or minus 3 hours either side of high tide for coming out of the marina. So through the lock and through this entrance here, which on lowest springs does dry. And as a rough guide, I use plus or minus 3 hours. Sometimes you can almost have plus or minus 5 hours on some tides on low neaps. So as we can quickly check the tides and have a look and see where we're at. Now at the moment, right now I'm doing this. Now I would normally prepare all this the day before we were going to set off. Now tomorrow, conveniently, high tide is at 10:56. So that would be an excellent time to start off. Very, very civilized. So if we zoom out, the other thing we want to check, bear in mind 10:56 was high tide. Let's have a look at the tidal stream, especially for the start going around the headland. It's not a big tide tomorrow. And it's actually slack water there around about 11:30, so that would be perfect, and then we get the tidal stream running with us. So for the start, well, I would again be looking at locking out of the marina round about 10:30ish, and then we can start to make use of the northerly running tide for the rest of the day. So if we come back to the route, and we've got these waypoints. The first waypoint is 1.8 nautical miles after we start, and that brings us to the first major turn. And we've got the rest of these waypoints down here now. Some I would ignore, and some I would use as a reference when I'm actually writing up my sail plan. Because this is the route. This is the course that we would be taking. But what I want to do is we also do a paper side to the sail plan, which has got more information that, than we would glean just from this. This is what we would put up onto our MFD in the at the helm. Now, this is on Navionics. On Baru, we have a Garmin MFD which runs on its own map, not Navionics. So I need to transfer this to the Garmin. Now the way I do this is I first of all would share it, and I would share the GPX file. I would actually email that GPX file to me, to my email address on my laptop, copy that onto an SD card, and then put the SD card into the Garmin. A bit long-winded, but that is the only real way I've got of bringing this route up onto that Garmin, and it's the GPX file that you want. So after we've done the route and copied it onto an SD card, so we pop the SD card into its slot. So when the card's in its slot, we come up with Manage User Data. You can copy the built-in map if you've got one on the card at that time. Select that. Merge from card, select a file, and then I'll pick out whichever GPX file we wanted to load. So what we need to do is transfer this data onto here. So what we've got is distance, time. We said an ideal start time would be 10:30, which is here. Now, because we have to lock out and get the boat prepped for sailing, so raise sails, etc., etc., I would say this first waypoint, which is actually 3 miles from the start, would take us an hour to get to there. So we'll only achieve 3 knots. After that, we should achieve, on plan, let's say 5 knots. So the first line we put on is actually an hour for 3 nautical miles. After that, it's going to be a distance left to do of approximately 27 nautical miles. Now, if we do that at 5 knots, then we're going to be running for approximately 5.5 hours. So we say that's the half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we ought to be coming into Blythe at around 1700 hours. So that's the sort of target. Now you can see we've got a dog leg there. So that's the plan. That's the planned route and planned time, entry time. Now there's some other aspects that we can put onto here, onto this. First of all, high tide at Hartlepool was 10:56. Next, let's have a look at, there is a VTS area here at the Tyne. So if we just put another waypoint in there at 5, so at 23 miles from the start, so there, just put a vertical line on there, and that's Tyne VTS. Now, if we go to our reads and come into the right area for northeast of England and look at the River Tyne, we'll see that communications Tyne VTS is channel 12, and there is a requirement to, we'll put that on there, it's channel 12. There is a requirement to call up Tyne VTS to ensure that it's safe to cross their zone, and you normally call them up about 1 mile beforehand. So we've got a mark there. The other thing is, at the end, at Blythe, there is also Blythe. So Blythe Harbour. And again, if we look at the details for Blythe on communications, theirs is also channel 12, which is a little bit confusing because it's quite close to the Tyne and do pick up both, but that is also channel 12. And whilst we're there, we'll have a look at the Northumberland Yacht Club. They're not on any VHS, but they do have a telephone. Now, for more complex routes, and this is a very simple one, you can add these verticals at any point. It might be a tidal gate. We don't have any tidal gates to worry about here, but you could put a tidal gate in and say, right, well, that's a minimum, that's the latest or the earliest you can achieve to get through that tidal gate. So next, what we want to do is look at the weather. So if we come away from Navionics, I use either windy or predict wind. We'll go on to windy. We've got very little wind. will not at around 10 o'clock, and up at Blythe for 1700. There's about 10 knots westerly. So we're going to be gaining wind as the day goes through. 1 knot westerly, and then Blythe 1700. We've got, what was that? About 8 knots on a westerly. So we can get that information directly there. Plus then we can have a look at the sea state. It's looking at round about Blythe in the afternoon at 0.9, 1.0 metres of wave. And it's there's no set direction by the look of it for that. Possibly slightly easterly. At each hour or a half hour, whatever, we'll make a mark on the route to show how we're progressing against this plan, whether we're above or below the line. And I'll show you one from previous. This happened to be Peterhead to Arbroath last year. So you can see we actually set off a little bit early and we kept above the line all the way down. And that was because we had a defined cut-off for Arbroath and we needed to arrive before that cut-off point. It's all about doing the passage plan, is looking ahead, trying to predict where you may have problems, and critically using the relevant information that's available. What I would also do, not only would I just use the Navionics tidal information, but I would also check the tide times that's in the almanac as well. So I hope you find that useful.